VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And thank you for joining us today here on Crosstalk. Folks, we are seeing an erosion of freedom take place across this country. In recent times, we've seen restrictions on freedom of speech. We're finding attacks on one's freedom of health care choices taking place today. We're hearing about freedom of worship, but not freedom of religion. And we're seeing the freedom of employees being eroded as employers, that is, as to who they hire. We see the freedom of business owners under attack as to their freedom to do business, such as a bakery coming under attack for using their freedom of conscience to not make a wedding cake that's designed for a same-sex, well, so-called marriage. We're seeing attacks leveled at the right to keep and bear arms, and there's yet another freedom that's facing uncertain times and that's facing increased scrutiny. That is the choice that parents across this nation are making to homeschool. Here to discuss the issue with us is Michael Ferris. He is the founder and chairman of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. He's also the chancellor of Patrick Henry College. Mike, thanks for joining us today here on Crosstalk.
It is my pleasure to be back with you.
Mike, the situation we're going to talk about today involves a family from Germany, the Romeike family, seeking asylum in the United States over their experience of having received fines, threat of jail, forcible removal of their children for doing something that we rather take for granted here in the country, that is that of homeschooling. But the issues that they're battling in the United States have revealed an attitude from our own Justice Department about homeschooling that we're going to talk about. But before we get into the specifics of this incident, would you just kind of explain to us the law of asylum that we have here in the United States?
Sure. Our country will give political asylum to anyone who's been persecuted on one of 5 grounds of kind of persecution. And the two that are relevant here are whether or not this family is being persecuted because of their exercise of their religious faith, and also because they're a part of a particular social group. And so those are the religious argument, I think, is pretty self-evident. This family is a Christian family, and they believe before God that the way that God would have them train up their children, and the only way that they have as a practical matter of getting a Christian education for their children that is consistent with their beliefs is to homeschool them. There aren't Christian schools in their area that are anything close to their belief systems. They're pretty traditional Protestant evangelical Christians. And so their only realistic choice for Christian education is homeschooling. So Germany doesn't allow it, and they don't allow this family to exercise their religious freedom. So that's one of the grounds. The particular social group argument is that Germany has decided that they're going to basically stamp out all homeschoolers, and so that argument relates to that practice.
Now, so introduce us then now to the Romeike family in Germany and what they encountered in their own country regarding homeschooling. What was their experience?
Well, the Romeike family has 5 children. I think that's right. It might be 6, but they have a medium-sized homeschool family, and they were threatened with fines and criminal prosecution, and they went to the officials and told them that they wanted to homeschool and that they were going to do it. They weren't trying to hide or be subversive or anything like that. And the government came after them with the full force of the law. They filed criminal prosecutions against the family and levied fines that ended up being several thousand euros, and it was the equivalent of about half a year, 9 months of salary for Mr. Romeike. So it was not a small amount of money. It was a devastating, crippling kind of fine. And when the Romeikes persisted in the face of those fines, they sent the police officers and a caravan of armed officers and in vans and so on to pick the Romeike children up from the home and forcibly take them to the public schools. And when the Romeikes got them back, and they came back to try it again another time, there were several witnesses standing by silently, neighbors and other homeschoolers, that the police backed off and went back to just threatening the parents with jail time. And they threatened also to take their kids away permanently with a loss of custody.
Now, you said this was witnessed by, you used the phrase, other homeschoolers.
Right. There were other families that are trying to. There are about 500 people in Germany with the courage to homeschool, and all of them that are found out by the government are being prosecuted. So nobody's being let off. Although they do let, like if a truck driver wanted to homeschool because he was on the road all the time, to keep their family together, they would allow them to homeschool. I mean, that's on paper. Mm-hmm. We don't know of anybody that's actually been permitted to do that, which is really weird that, in order to keep the truck driver's family together, they would let you homeschool for economic reasons. But if a religious family wants to homeschool, they won't let that family stay together. They'll break the family up and give custody of the children to the government, and forcibly, and permanently break that family up because the family wanted to stay together through homeschooling. It's not logical what they're doing.
Yeah, and we're talking 6 to 9 months equivalent of their salary. You said forcible removal of their children by the police. The police actually came to their home,
right,
apprehended the kids, and took them to school.
Right. Yeah. The kids were obviously very afraid, and not a few tears were shed. It was quite a dramatic episode, and so this is not the first time the German police have done such things. They held up another family's daughter. I was actually in that home, not at the time of the events, but later on, and they took a 16-year-old girl out, armed guard, and put her off in a psychiatric institute because she had, quote-unquote, school phobia. And school phobia was defined as she wanted to be homeschooled rather than go to the public school. So that caused her to be deserving of a psychiatric institute. Germany is really repressive about this. They mean business, and the law that was brought into being at the time of Adolf Hitler is still in effect and is still being enforced.
And I understand this went through the courts in Germany, and actually the Supreme Court of Germany actually was very clear about homeschooling in Germany. Tell us about it.
And that was not with the Romeike family, but that was with other families where the Supreme Court of Germany ruled. But it's a precedent that applies to all the homeschool cases that follow. And they said that the purpose for banning homeschooling is to prevent the development of religious and philosophical minorities from becoming parallel societies. And that, I don't know how it sounds to other people, but in Germany, people go, "Oh, that's good. We want all Germans to be homogenized," and it really is dangerous when you think about it. What they're saying is, we don't want anybody in this country to think differently than the majority.
I mean, is totalitarianism too strong a word?
I don't think so. I think it is thought control. It is totalitarian, at least vis-a-vis these families, that's for sure. And you could have a country that has blind spots and idiosyncratic areas where they're generally free, but in some ways they just simply miss the mark and they're totalitarian. In this area, Germany's totalitarian.
So how did the Romeike family come to the U.S.? How did they get here? What kind of process did they go through? I guess they sought asylum here in the United States?
Yeah, they came here on a regular, tourist application. But as soon as they arrived, the plan was from the beginning that they were going to apply for asylum. So as soon as they arrived, they went and applied for asylum. I don't mean 15 minutes. I mean within a very short period of time after arriving, and they sought political asylum. And the first judge ruled in their favor, said that, yeah, indeed, you're right. Germany is persecuting you on the basis of religion, and so he ruled in their favor. And,
so they were actually granted asylum?
Yeah, they were. But the Obama administration appealed that decision to a higher immigration board, and that immigration board agreed with the Obama administration. And so now we've appealed it on their behalf. So this is the second appeal. And we're now into the actual courts of the United States rather than just simply the administrative immigration authorities, and we're in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the second highest court of the country. It's one level below the Supreme Court.
This is rather appalling when we see virtually by means of executive order our own immigration laws are circumvented by the President of the United States. We see his implementation of this and has been warning to do more in Congress. There's a battle going on right now on this, but there is such a intent on the part of the President for so many illegal aliens that are part of this country to be assimilated and receive amnesty. Here we have a family that have received religious persecution. This is a violation of their own religious beliefs. The actions that have been taken against them in Germany. They've come here to the United States, sought asylum, been granted it, and now we have the Obama administration Justice Department that is fighting against this.
Exactly. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, people have suggested, well, they don't expect homeschoolers to vote for the Democrats. That's the reason the Obama administration is taking the position they are. I don't know that they've thought it through that far, but it is very ironic. At the very time we're taking steps to grant amnesty to around 11 million illegal aliens, a family that came here and did it the right way and applied the correct way, and won at the first level, that the Obama administration would fight all the way through, to the bitter end to try to send them back to Germany so that the German government can take their kids away from them.
Now, was this asylum that they were granted? I mean, is that the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services that granted the asylum?
It was an immigration judge that did it. The bureaucrats did not, but the first level judge granted them asylum.
Okay. And if that's not appealed, I mean, it's just accepted as being such?
That would be the end of it. They would have had asylum.
Yeah. I was just looking at the Citizenship and Immigration Services website here today as far as asylum, and it says a grant of asylum in the United States does not expire. However, it may be terminated, your asylum status, if you no longer have a well-founded fear of persecution because of fundamental change in circumstances, or if you obtain protection from another country, or obtained the original asylum grant through fraud, or you committed certain crimes or engaged in other activities that make you ineligible to retain asylum in the United States. None of those would apply to the Romeike family.
No, they wouldn't. But, in fairness, procedurally, it wasn't final. I mean, it was appealable. Both sides can appeal that initial decision. And so, but they weren't invoking one of those grounds.
Okay.
They were just simply saying, you're not entitled to asylum. And the reason that they say that is what really disturbs me the most. I mean, the whole thing disturbs me, but when you focus in on this particular aspect of it, what they contend is that the only way that homeschoolers would ever get political asylum in this country is if Germany treated different classes of homeschoolers differently. And so we'll come back and explain it more.
We'll have you pause right there. Michael Ferris is our guest here today from the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. Yeah, folks, we're talking about a family from Germany, but guess what? There are implications for the homeschool freedom across the United States. We'll be discussing more on this issue after the break. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, Creation Seminar speaker and president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, how many creation museums are there?
Chris, there are quite a few now. The museum at the Institute for Creation Research was the first museum, and it's somewhat the prototype for all the others. By the way, if you're ever in the San Diego area, please do come by and visit ICR's Museum of Creation and Earth History. But now many of our creationist friends have put up creation museums all around the world, from England to Hong Kong to Canada, and a number in the States. There's a new very large one just opened in Kentucky. All of these give visual evidence for creation and stress that the evidence doesn't fit with evolution at all. I recommend we all go back to Genesis.
For more information on the foundational principles set forth in Genesis, simply visit us on the web at www.icr.org. That's www.icr.org. For the Institute for Creation Research, I'm Chris O'Brien. Thanks for tuning in.
With us today on Crosstalk is Michael Ferris, the founder and chairman of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, chancellor of Patrick Henry College. Also, you hear their broadcast on many of these VCY America stations every day called Homeschool Heartbeat. And certainly we're talking about an issue that has homeschooling in the crosshairs as far as being under attack. And you're going to hear about some of these ways in which homeschooling has come under attack, even with this court case regarding the Romeike family of Germany, but also its implications on the broader aspect of liberty and freedom here in this nation as well. Mike, just before we continue on with this, just give us a word about the role and purpose of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association.
Well, HSLDA will be 30 years old next month, and I founded it basically so that if any homeschooler in America was harassed by the government, we'd all step in to defend them. And, the Lord has blessed that over 30 years, and we've seen a whole lot of success in the defense of homeschooling freedom. But that's what we're about, is we're here to defend both with litigation and legislative activity and public awareness to make sure that every parent, we're a Christian organization, and most of our members are Christians, but we serve everybody. We serve all families because we believe that God gives children to parents, not to government. And whether those parents agree with our religious beliefs or not, that's not our mission in the homeschool world. Our mission is to defend their rights. And if they become Christians along the way, we're thrilled about that. And that's happened many times.
And for those who'd like to learn about joining HSLDA, you have a website?
It's hslda.org. Yes, indeed. We would love to hear from them.
Okay. Well, we're talking about the Romeike family, and this, Mike, I understand that you have recently appealed this to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals?
Yes. In fact, just today we got the notice of the oral argument. So we're going to have the actual hearing on April the 23rd at 1:30 in the afternoon in Cincinnati. April
23rd. And this is a family, they're residing in Tennessee?
They are, which is within the jurisdiction of the Sixth Circuit.
Mm-hmm. Well, the U.S. Attorney General's office is fighting the asylum case here, and they have. First of all, I think it's important to note that we're not talking about just some underling. I mean, the name of the case actually has the name of the U.S. Attorney General in it, doesn't it?
It does. It's Eric Holder versus the Romeikes, and actually Romeike versus Holder, to be precise. Mm-hmm. And so the brief is filed on behalf of him personally. And he may or may not have actually read this, but he certainly knows about the policy implications. And it's fair to say that this is a very high-level government effort. First of all, you're in the second highest court of the country, and it's on behalf of the Attorney General of the United States. So this is not some underling, low-level deputy that doesn't know what he's doing, who's presenting it. This is official government policy at a very high level.
Well, you point out that the U.S. government has argued many, many things in their brief, challenging the Romeikes in this, but you talk about, you bring to light three specific arguments that our listeners really need to know about and their implications here. Share those with us if you would.
Well, since I'm doing it from memory, I hope I get the right order, but I'll get all three.
Sure.
The first is that the government contends that there are no individual liberties that should be protected under the asylum law. As long as there's equal protection that's granted, then it's okay. And that is a violation of several important principles. First, religious freedom is an individual right. They argue, well, not all Christians in Germany believe they have to homeschool, and not all homeschoolers are Christians. So therefore, there is no group that supports their decision that God requires them to homeschool. The U.S. Supreme Court has rejected that many times and has said that religious freedom is an individual right, that people can be of a faith that has differing views on various points, and the cases that the Supreme Court has dealt with involved whether or not you were working on Saturday, and another case was whether or not you would make military armaments. And they said, we don't care if other people in that same religion would make the armaments. This person had a sincere religious objection to making military weapons. and it's an individual right. And so the fact that our government argues that they don't have a right to homeschool because their religious views are individual in character shows they don't really believe in individual rights for religious freedom, which helps explain their attack against Hobby Lobby as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that really has broad implications in so many different areas in our society.
It does indeed, and it's part of the mentality of this administration. They only think of people as parts of groups. And not only do we lose the individual, we lose individual rights when you approach life that way. Mm-hmm. And that's really the second argument, is that they contend that there is no fundamental right of parents to homeschool their children. There's only an equal protection question, and so as long as Germany is treating all homeschoolers equally badly in this case, and persecuting and prosecuting everybody, then the U.S. government doesn't think there's anything wrong with that, which is a violation not only of the principles that this country holds dear, but the international law documents that Germany is held to. Now, I'm a big opponent of using international law for domestic purposes, but this is an asylum case. This is one of the areas where international law is supposed to apply. And, the legitimate basis for international law is when you have cases on how nations interact with each other. That's what international law is supposed to be for. So it applies here, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights both say that parents have a prior right to direct the upbringing and education of their children. And the one, the ICESCR, says that parents have the right to create schools that are different from the government schools so long as they meet basically academic objectives. Mm-hmm. And so Germany is a party to all those relevant treaties and more. In fact, the UN has appointed a special investigator, a rapporteur, to review this, and he's concluded that Germany's in the wrong here. They're in violation of international law and human rights standards for persecuting homeschoolers in the way they're doing, and they should allow homeschooling in Germany. But Germany resists all that, and the American government is joining that resistance, which says our country does not believe that parental rights and religious freedom are protectable. That in short, homeschooling is not a protectable right. That our country could take away the right to homeschooling entirely, and it's a privilege. If the government lets you, fine. They let you. But if the government doesn't let you, then that's fine too.
Yeah, I mean, and bottom line there, I mean, isn't the government in essence saying if a nation violates no one's rights if it bans homeschooling entirely?
That's exactly what they're saying, and so we should get a little nervous when they say that, because there are people in this country, and I can name their names. Catherine Urraco, who teaches at the law school at Northwestern University. Martha Albertson Finneman, who teaches at Emory University. Catherine Ross, who teaches at George Washington University. Rob Reich, who teaches at Stanford University. All of these professors have written articles that have called for the dramatic curtailment, either by banning homeschooling entirely, like Finneman at Emory has argued, or absolutely controlling its philosophical content to stop Christians from teaching their children radical concepts like Jesus is the only way to God. And so there are serious people with published articles in major legal publications advocating exactly the same position as the German government. And so, and they have friends in high places because, they are part and parcel of the intellectual elite that runs the Obama administration. And we see this exact same policy being worked out here. And so we have every reason to believe that, given the right opportunity, the Obama administration would implement the same policy as Germany. And, philosophically they're in line with it. And we need and they're taking action against this one family. Well, who's to say they're not going to take action against other families as well?
And families right here in the United States. Now, some might say this, well, why doesn't this family just let them go to the government school? I mean, what does the school have? Maybe 30 hours a week. And then when they get home, the parents can teach them whatever they want and tell them what they heard in school is wrong, and they can instill their religious values. What's wrong with that scenario?
Well, when we're talking about religious freedom, we use analogies in legal argument a lot, and to discern the right principles. Would anyone say to a Jewish family, well, we're going to feed your kids in the public schools non-kosher food. We're going to feed them pork products for, it's only 25, 30 hours a week, but the rest of the week you can feed them kosher. Everybody would understand that's a problem. And it's the same problem here, because this family has a religious objection to what's being taught in the public schools. So there's, the philosophy of the German public schools is every bit as radical as the philosophy of most American public schools on evolution and many other topics that are of concern to Christians. The moral atmosphere of amorality and moral relativism is just as prevalent in the public schools of Germany as they are here in the United States. And a lot of Christians have come to say, I can't do that to my kids. And so this family has reached that conclusion. And so it's not a matter of only what they want them to be taught. It's a matter of what they don't want them to be taught. And they don't want them to be taught the things that they consider to be contrary to their faith that are taught every day in the public schools.
Let's bring this home then to our listeners, because no doubt there are some saying, well, this is just a family from Germany who's applying for asylum, and, we really don't need to worry about, after all, this issue. How does this impact me? Why does this matter? How can this impact homeschooling freedom that we have right here in the United States?
Well, it can, because of the precedent that any case like this can set, and it also reveals the heart and intention of our current administration. Their belief is anti-individual liberty on a very broad basis, and that their group think at a deep and dangerous level. And so that repudiation of individual liberty should shock every American. Secondly, for homeschooling itself specifically, we've seen executive orders on lots of different subjects. And so if President Obama gets it in his head that he's going to issue an executive order to ban homeschooling, I wouldn't put it past that administration to try something like that, especially as they get closer to the end of this 4-year term, because they're capable of anything. Who knows? But we set precedent. We put programs and policies in motion, and sometimes they don't take effect immediately, but sometimes they come in quite soon. And so, for my money, having been at this business for 30 years, I want to stop the erosion of liberty at the first instance. I don't want to wait until it gets really bad. And the precedent that could be set by this case and by the administration's policy we're planting seeds, and those seeds will grow up in time. Whether that time is a year, 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years, I can't tell you that. But I can tell you it will grow up in time. If it's allowed to be planted, it will grow up, and it will reap harvest, and it will apply in American families.
Michael Ferris is with us today here on Crosstalk, and folks, we're talking about the doctrine of gradualism. If we can just start chipping away at those freedoms, before you know it, that total freedom will be eroded. Let's open the phone lines to hear what you have to say across the country. Our number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. You're listening to Crosstalk.
If you were asked how you know the Bible is true, do you have an answer? We are living in an increasingly skeptical society, whether it comes to politics, science, or even faith. People see conflict everywhere, even about fundamental aspects of the Bible. Sadly, many church leaders are at odds about biblical truth and scriptural authority, leaving believers confused and uncertain, and in need of clear biblical teaching. In the books, How Do We Know the Bible is True?, editors Ken Ham and Bodie Hodge have compiled from numerous authors responses to many questions, such as, is the Bible totally without error? Did the resurrection really happen? How do we know the 66 books of the Bible are from God? And numerous other issues. Volume 1 or Volume 2 are available for a donation of $17 each, or both can be obtained for a donation of $30 to VCY America by calling 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829.
Michael Ferris is with us today from the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. We're talking about the Romeike family who's come to the United States to seek asylum from what they have faced in Germany. Their religious conviction and belief of that of homeschooling their children, they have faced fines, forcible removal of their children with police actually coming to their home, taking their kids, forcing them to school, threats of jail against the parents, and the U.S. Justice Department, under the direction of Eric Holder and the direction of the president, are actually filing against this family to reject political asylum, to reject their asylum here in the United States. Mike, there are those who are asking, what can I do? What can I do regarding this situation? I think you have some helpful things that our listeners can do.
Well, there may be a need for political action after this case gets through the next level, but we're not ready to launch that yet because we're hopeful we're going to win at the Sixth Circuit and set the right precedent. But in the meantime, it wouldn't hurt to simply call the Attorney General's office and register your concern about their policy, and why are they fighting this? Why are they appealing the original judge's decision? And they should set a broad precedent for religious liberty, not a narrow and ungenerous view of religious liberty and individual rights in this country. So, calling the Attorney General's hotline is something people could do. I'm not urging them to do that. Partly because I'm engaged in litigation with them, and I should treat my opponent with respect.
Sure.
But it's the Attorney General of the United States as well. So the people are entitled to talk to the Attorney General if they want to. I'm not urging it.
Well, folks, I am.
Okay.
I am, and I would encourage you to contact the Attorney General's office. Does have a public comment line where you can call and leave a message, let your comments be made known to them, and that Attorney General public comment line. And I mean, it's there. It's a public number for people to call and share their views on issues. That number is 202-353-1555. 202-353-1555. And there's something else I believe that people can do, and I know you've been with us before in the program talking about something called the Parental Rights Amendment. And this is something I know that HSLDA has been promoting for families across this nation to get behind and support and to contact their legislators for issues just like what we're seeing here, arguments from the U.S. Attorney General's office.
That's right. We have a special organization that's a spin-off of HSLDA that's dedicated to that issue. It's called parentalrights.org. And if you want to preserve American families' rights on a permanent basis, it won't matter who's in the White House or who's in the Attorney General's office. The Parental Rights Amendment is the solution to that. And if people want to get involved and help us, which we really need the involvement and the help on a regular basis there, it's parentalrights.org. That's the place to go.
Let's go to our phone lines, and we have Tim calling. Tim, are you calling right from Hamburg, Germany?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for calling and listening online. And your question or comment?
Yes. I live here where the Romeikes left. They were in Hamburg and they left here. And I certainly understand and appreciate their conviction about homeschooling. I have 2 school-age children here. We are church planters here. And just as an encouragement of a situation where God is giving grace in the circumstance, we had gone through the whole process of looking into homeschooling and seeing if it's something we could do, and found it was just a no-go from all standpoints. There was absolutely no freedom for us to do that here. So we checked around and found a Christian school here. We checked their website. All faculty and administrative people must have a testimony of salvation, that they are saved. And our personal experience for years, we've had our daughter, she's now up into the 5th grade there, and she's had some wonderful, godly teachers there. Some of them are less than what we would expect our standards. Mm-hmm. But a school director in the school where she just went out of 4th grade into 5th grade to new school, and our son is in that school, just a very godly man. He prays with us, and it's just God's grace. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the Romeikes would be looking at if they return, but I would say for them, if they have no other avenue that the Christian school our children are in would be an option for them right here in Hamburg.
Let's have Michael comment on that.
Well, I'm a big fan of Christian education in general. Obviously, given my background, homeschooling is my first choice, but I'm a big fan of Christian schools. And the principle we're fighting for is that parents who want to homeschool, even if there was a good Christian school nearby and affordable to them, they should have the right to do that. But secondly, there are not good Christian schools in every place in Germany, and it's pretty rare, is my understanding. And what I've been told, and I would be interested in hearing this pastor's perspective on it, is that most of the Christian schools in Germany actually use the public school curriculum. Is that the case in your school?
They have to have public school accredited teachers and administration and their books. However, our school teaches creation first. They are required to teach evolution, but they teach it secondarily and teach the creation. The school administrator did teach sex education to them, but was done very discreetly to a grade school level class that is required by law. But we were satisfied that it was done discreetly. And our daughter's 1st grade teacher said, my goal for these children is that they come to know Christ as Savior and learn to love Him.
Well, it sounds like you found a school that's making the best of a bad situation. But one of the Romeike's concerns, and I'm glad to hear it validated, is that every Christian school in Germany must use the public school curriculum, and that's not religious freedom. That's something that would be utterly unacceptable in a free country, and Germany's thought control of the Christian schools even comes into play there. Now, the school is doing a good job, it sounds like, of counteracting it as best they can, but it's going to lead to confusion in some instances with some kids. And so, I think that the family's doing the right thing by fighting for their family, for their freedom, and for coming to the United States to seek a truly free country.
Tim, thank you for the call from Germany there. We do appreciate it.
We just simply have a situation where we've got a couple independent Bible-preaching churches here that are sending ever more of our kids to these schools, and they're a mutual encouragement to each other. And they do have classmates who are not saved from homes they're not saved, but the parents are told this is a Christian school.
And yet they do have to teach the state curriculum. Okay. Thank you so much, Tim. And perhaps that's, one of the major objections here, Mike, is that they're forced to teach a curriculum that the parents object to from the first place.
That's right. That's part of the Romeike's objection about the German program on Christian schools. There are some families that believe that God's directed them to homeschool no matter what, and I would be of that category myself. But there are others who would be satisfied with a Christian school. But there are many Christian families who would not be happy to have a Christian school where the government curriculum of evolution and the sex education, all that's being taught. And I commend the pastor in that school for making the best of a bad situation. But it's a bad situation, and we need to face it up for what it is.
Let's go to Waukesha, Wisconsin. And Aaron, thanks for your patience. Hello, Aaron. Okay, I guess Aaron's on some other call there. Let's go to Randy, calling from Wisconsin. Randy, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hello.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that, I guess the question is whether we should really have public schools or not. I don't believe we should because it's of the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment concerns the police powers, which are health, education, welfare, family affairs, and police protection. And those rights are all reserved to the state.
Well, the public schools are state institutions. They're not federal institutions. And so we're not violating the 10th Amendment merely by having public schools. Now, there's violation of the 10th Amendment by the way the federal government's controlling some aspects of the public schools. That's a 10th Amendment problem. But the existence of public schools doesn't violate the 10th Amendment because every state's constitution permits and requires the creation of public schools. Now, whether or not that's a wise political move, that's a different story. But this is a matter of constitutional law. The public schools are a matter of state constitutional law, not federal, and they're permissible under the state constitutions. Now, whether that they can force everybody to go to them, that's a different question. And that was attempted in Oregon in the 1920s. The Scottish Rite Masons, with the substantial help of the Ku Klux Klan, banned all private education in Oregon on the basis of creating this great melting pot that would make everybody into a true American, which is exactly what Germany's trying to do. The parallel between the Oregon Mason and Ku Klux Klan experiment and Germany is unmistakable. And our country was never intended to be a melting pot in the sense that we're going to break people in and break down what they really believe and force them to be like the government wants them to believe. That's what the melting pot has come to. Really, the better picture is a tapestry, that everybody should be allowed to be free to be themselves, and the government shouldn't force anybody to adhere to its philosophy. And so we've got to stand up for a strong philosophy of freedom. And there is a real legitimate question of whether that can be done when the government's operating a school system. But that's a question of political philosophy, not a question of constitutional law. And as a matter of political philosophy, there's a lot to be said with what this caller has said. But there's a difference between state and federal constitutional law. That since I teach constitutional law, I have to give you what the right academic answer is, even if I don't particularly like the answer.
Thank you, Randy. And perhaps this is why we heard people like former President Reagan seek to abolish the Department of Education.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
If we can just do straight politics for a second, the biggest problem in our country politically is that the federal government is taking away the power of the states. And the reason we are $17 trillion in debt, and that's just really the tip of the iceberg if we really want to know the truth, is because the federal government is spending money that only the states can lawfully spend. And on subject matters only the states can lawfully spend money on, like welfare and medical care and Medicaid care. All those things are lawfully only within the state's authority and not within the federal government's authority. And we're going bankrupt over the violation of the 10th Amendment and the violation of the General Welfare Clause. So, these issues are important in preserving the 10th Amendment and all that goes with it. They're really the principles of federalism, which are in actually several parts of the Constitution. We've got to fight hard for that, and that's a different thing than we're talking about today with homeschooling. But it's real and it's true, and it's this nation isn't going to survive if we keep going on the road of Washington D.C. gathering all the power and money to itself.
Michael Ferris is our guest here today on Crosstalk. Our telephone number, 800-733-9829. Do you homeschool? Do you champion the right of parents to homeschool? Are you bothered by the Justice Department believing that religion is not an individual right? Are you bothered by the arguments that they are making here pertaining to the Romeike family? We welcome your phone calls, 800-733-9829. We'll pick up more calls after the break. Our guest today, Michael Ferris from HSLDA. We'll be right back.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewweekend.com. Recently, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, a liberal foundation, put out a report in which they admitted that they were giving money to evangelicals for them to become a voice in pushing sustainable development. Well, for those of you who don't know, sustainable development came out of the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992. Sustainable Development, or Agenda 21, is the framework for global governance. It includes abortion on demand, population control. It includes ending the Second Amendment rights of American citizens. It includes public housing, the expansion of the welfare state, the end of parental authority, the promotion of pagan spirituality in our schools, and much, much more. That's sustainable development. That's Agenda 21. And the Rockefeller Brothers Fund admits in their own document they're giving money to evangelical organizations and individuals for them to push this on the church. Now, you talk about a religious Trojan horse, that's a religious Trojan horse.
You know, folks, even though this is an asylum case regarding a family coming to the United States from Germany, the question is being asked today, is U.S. homeschool freedom under attack? We're talking about it today with Michael Ferris from the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. Again, I encourage you to check out their website, hslda.org, and certainly they are fighting for the continued freedom of homeschooling here across these United States, and they will be putting forth press releases and updates on their website as this issue advances. The oral argument's coming up on April 23rd, and folks, keep in mind, the Attorney General does have a public comment line that you can share your views on this matter at 202-353-1555. Let's go back to the phone lines. Calling from Wisconsin Dells, we have John calling. Go ahead, John, you're on the air.
Hello, Michael and Jim. I agree with the homeschooling and those people seeking assignment, but on the subject of the gradualism, it's like back in the 1990s we had Jay Leno and people on TV saying it's okay to be gay, and we got propagandized with that for all these years, and now we have the homosexual problem that we're having. Also with evolution, it took them years of gradually getting that into the schools, saying, oh, it's only 170 million years, and now it's billions of years, and all this kind of foolishness. And people need to stick with the Lord and have the Lord to guide and direct them. But a lot of people are like sheep, and they're just going to do what the majority of people do. And I'll hang up and listen to the comments. But thank you, guys.
Appreciate that. And that's why, Michael, you're seeking to really nip this thing in the bud.
That's right. We want to preserve freedom on a day-by-day basis. And, this is a bigger day than other days. In this particular case, this is one of the more important cases we've done the last 3, 4, 5 years. So not every day is equal, but every day's battle is important to it. It's like Nehemiah rebuilding the wall. Every stone was important. And the day we think that we can just let this go and freedom will be okay, we're wrong. And if a Republican was elected president, we'd still be wrong. We have to fight for freedom day in, day out. And we need to stop thinking of presidents as little messiahs who will either solve all our problems or create all the problems. They're a human being, and we need to be responsible for our own liberty on a continuous basis. Ever
vigilant. Let's go to Paul calling from Viroqua. You're on the air.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm for homeschooling, but couldn't some Christian kids that they wanted to stay in the public school to be salt and light? I wanted to know what your guests actually thought about that.
I'll have them comment, but that is a separate issue than we're talking about here as far as the parents having a right to choose to homeschool their children. But go ahead and address that, Mike, if you would.
Sure. Well, I think that if we were talking about kids that are 16, 17 years old, that's a family's choice and an individual's choice, and I don't think that we should be hard and fast about that. I'm not going to tell other families what they should do, but for my sake, the Salt and Light command is not the training command. There's a more specific command in Scripture about training your kids. And in Romans 1, it warns you pretty strongly about what happens if you enter a system of knowledge where they don't think it's worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God. So if you don't retain the knowledge of God, they do things that ought not to become done, and they're filled with every kind of depravity. So my way I read Scripture is I take the more specific command and apply it when we're in that specific area. So when we look at how does God want us to train our children, the answer is in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. Now, if other families read it differently, that's fine with me, but that's how I read it and how I would differ with that particular analysis for my own kids.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. To Ellen. Go ahead, Ellen, you're on the air.
Hi, I was wondering what the guest speaker knows about the Common Core standards being pushed on. Well, it started, I've noticed it in Milwaukee coming down through the public schools, but it's also moving to the private schools. And they were talking about, I read something about some of those might be even pushed on Common Core standards like Saxon Math, homeschooling.
Let me mention, Ellen, we've done a full program on that with Eagle Forum, and they've done some great work and research regarding that. Any comment that you have, Michael?
It's just it's a Trojan horse. It's a bad thing, and I refer you to Eagle Forum on the details.
Great. EagleForum.org, and you put in Common Core standards. You'll find a lot of material there of concern regarding those standards.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Randy in Madison, you're on the air.
Hi, Mr. Ferris. I'd just like to voice my support for homeschooling as a homeschooling father of 4. I would just like to get your opinion. I know that our hope doesn't lie in political parties, but we had a candidate back in 2008 and this past election who was a strong homeschool supporter who wanted to abolish the Department of Education and many other things. And I know the HSLDA did not support Ron Paul back in 2008. They supported Huckabee, who was endorsed by the NEA of all people. And I'd just like to know your reasons why you did not support Ron Paul as a...
Okay. Again, we're kind of going afoul of our topic here today.
Well, I will just say briefly, we didn't endorse anybody in 2012. And the answer lies in, we looked at things comprehensively, not just one particular issue. And frankly, Ron Paul's views of the constitutional rights of parents are not the same as ours. And Rand Paul, his son, by the way, shares our views. We endorsed Rand Paul when he ran for the Senate, and working with him closely right now. So if the dad had the father's views, if the father had the son's views, rather, we probably would have endorsed him. But because of his views on rights of parents in particular, and under the Constitution of the United States, that was our biggest hang-up. But Rand Paul, we think, is a great guy, and we have supported him in the past.
Thank you, Randy. Michael, we have just less than a minute left. What thought would you like to leave with our listeners today regarding this issue?
Well, I would urge people to pray. I know that everybody says this when you're Christian. It's kind of the Christian thing to say. But I have seen too many cases turned by prayer. And so I would ask you to, everyone to be praying for this case and ask the judge's heart to be soft when they listen to the case. And so that they do the right thing and they'd really do justice here, and that we would preserve freedom in this country.
And again, that oral argument date, April 23rd, correct?
That's correct.
And folks, circle that on your calendar. Be praying. Will you be doing that argument?
I will be.
Okay. Be praying for Michael Ferris as he represents the Romeike family there before the 6th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. Michael, thanks for bringing this to our attention here today and for keeping us informed and battling for the right to homeschool here across the nation.
It's always a pleasure to be with you.
God bless you. Michael Ferris has been our guest. Again, the website, hslda.org. Check it out. And if you want to make that comment to the Attorney General's public comment line, 202-353-1555. Thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.